stuff when it absolutely is required for you and your organization. So my presentation, guys, the reason that form's going out, if you put your name on that, you'll get a link to all the YouTube videos that are included in this, all the products I'm talking about. I kind of created a video for each of those products, and you're going to see. Sure. The other downside to this is I ask you to fill out 2 eval forms, one for my company that justifies my existence, and the other one is the important one, which is for the Kindle Fire Raffle. This is a survey for the VMUG itself. So that's the worst part about being here. You don't have to take a lot of notes because you will get, and that's for you. Sorry. That's the worst part. Apologize, but I want to make sure you guys get a chance to interact. Now this session is geared to be your session, so if there's something you want to hear or talk more about, tell me. I'm trying to wrap this session up in 30 minutes based on the number of attendees. I know that's realistic because the first session only took 36 minutes and there was about 50 people. So we should be able to go through it. So what this session is on this second slide is I just want to show you some of the software I've been using to make my life easier in day-to-day administration of a VMware environment specifically. You'll see some overflow into some Unix and some Windows environment, but it's just tools that don't cost anything. They're easy to get, and you'll see that the format of each video for this next slide here listed out in the agenda. Each one of these products we're going to show you where to download it, how to get it, how to install it, and then when you go and you look at the actual YouTube videos associated with all these products in your office for the ones that interest you, you'll hear my voice and you'll hear the audio overlay on that video. It talks a little bit about how I use it. Great news is my cards are available. If you got further questions, I can definitely address them for you directly in email, telephone call, whatever it takes. So we can go through and we'll start here. Microsoft Remote Desktop Connection Manager on the next slide. And this video really kind of goes through and plays out. So for the Microsoft Remote Desktop Connection Manager, it's an easy, free download. Essentially what this is, it's an extension of Remote Desktop. Remote Desktop, we all use it, right? We're all RDPing into our boxes. Nobody goes up to the KVM anymore. We all use these kinds of RDP things. This tool is kind of awesome because it'll give you a hierarchical structure in a specific in the Remote Desktop Connection Manager interface, and you can have 10, 20, 30 servers all grouped up with all their appropriate authentication mechanisms, your preferences, your screen sizes, and then there's a lot of other features. I really only use it just to group up all my servers. The example I'll talk about here in this video that we're looking at is I'll show you how to fire it up, build 2 different server groups, one for lab and one for production. And the reason I use that example is perhaps lab has one level of authentication requirements and one name. Maybe you use the administrator account there. While if you were looking at working on your production servers, you would use a different authentication, perhaps your administrative user account, not the generic domain admin. But it goes through and walks you through that and the importance of saving this configuration file time and time again. So anybody using this tool today? I use this tool everywhere, and it's great. It's just, you know what, when you start dealing with management of a lot of servers, it's the same reason we all like the vSphere interface, right? We can right-click Open Console. This gives us the ability to do it without having to have that vSphere console open and use native operating system tools to hit those remote desktop sessions.
So this uses the standard one that's built into Win 7?
Does this use the standard RDP that's built into Win 7? Yes, it does. So the network level authentication that you're probably hinting for does exist. It'll use whatever is in the operating system you're running. So if you're on XP, it'll work in the XP mode. If you're in Windows 7, it'll work in the 7 mode.
Because it connects to 2003, 2008.
Connect to whatever Windows server you're allowed to have access to via RDP. It doesn't give you any new rules or credentials. It's just a tool to aggregate all those different screens. So you can see here that we're building it out. So that might be 2003, 2008 server listed out there. But whatever it is, it's great. We can connect to it. All right. Well, we'll move on to the next slide, and you guys can look at the... Sure.
So all those 4 sessions now, that 3 that got up there.
So they're...
Just minimize and then you just flip back and forth.
So you see how you're bouncing back and forth there between the different screenshots?
Yep.
You can, if you go to the left and you go up one fold, you'll see all the active screens in the right side and the right pane.
But you have to log into every one of those.
That's correct. And I see how it says production in that folder group of those 3 systems. I set my authentication credentials at that group. All the children down in that object inherit those authentication.
Okay. Now, what about the timeout? Like usually we set it for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes.
All those rules still apply. This is exactly the same thing as remote desktop connection, except you can have all of your RDC sessions here in this one pane. So if you set up restrictions or limitations or timeouts, they will still apply because they're down at the host OS.
Okay.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Thank you. Now this, the sheet going around right now, guys, that's for getting an email of all of these presentations. There's 2 other survey forms floating around. Sorry for so many forms. This one's for the raffle, and I'll have another one floating around for the company eval, my company's eval of me. All right, so we'll hit on and we'll move on to the next slide. Anybody still running 2000 and 2003 OSs? All right, this is your favorite tool that replaces partition magic that costs you no money. So Gparted is an open source software. This video, when you go back to your office tomorrow, what it's going to show you to do is how to download it, what file you're going to download. What you're going to download from the Gparted website is an ISO file, a bootable ISO file. So it's just, essentially what you'll do in a 2003 or an older OS. If you need to resize the C drive, because we've all done that once or twice, this tool will allow you to go ahead and boot the VM from the CD-ROM or the ISO image. You'll be able to then resize the virtual partition, that operating system drive partition. And then when you reboot the VM after that, you're done. You've grown the actual system volume. So this video here that you're looking at will actually walk you through that process, and you'll see the entire example. You've seen that I can grow the VMDK file. I'll reboot. I'll use the ISO file. I'll boot the VM from the ISO file, and then I'll just grow the partition.
What happens if you want to shrink it?
You never shrink any operating system volume ever. Are you running? Let me ask you this: are you running?
Data partition.
I'm sorry?
What happens if it was data partition?
If it's a data partition, you can do it online using the diskpart utilities, or you could use this if you have a Windows 2000 OS. You can use this tool to grow that partition. For shrinking, we'll hit the next one, which will be VMware Converter. That's how you shrink VMs. You do not use Windows. Anyone here trust Windows to run everything in their data center?
No.
Just because you can do something in Windows, right, means we always do it, right? So how many of you all run Windows routers? All right, just because it says I can shrink a file system, technically, does not mean I'm going to. So that's where vConverter comes in, and actually that's the next tool that we talk about. Anyone want to go dive in deeper into this Gparted?
Well, so before this solution, did people use Converter to extend the C drive?
Nope, before this tool existed, I can't remember when that might have been. We always had Partition Magic or some tool like this. It was a partition resizer. Some of them were pay-for products, some of them were open source. But before 2003 on Windows 2000, you had to use tools like this to even do the data drives. In 2003, you could use the diskpart command, but only on data drives, never the operating system drive. Well, all of us ran into the problem that we needed to grow the operating system drive. So that's why I've been using this as like standard tool sets in all my deployments and all my customer sites. I make sure everybody's aware that they can do this.
You could do it with Converter, though, right?
You absolutely could do it with Converter.
Right.
Well, you can do it with Converter if you want to take the time and bring the VM down for even a little bit. This brings it down, one reboot, you're done. Converter, you might be 10 minutes. But in version 3.5 of ESX, you weren't allowed to grow a VMDK file except from the command line. That made it a little more difficult or scary for some folks, and then we would go ahead and we would do Converter to do that. Today, I mean, you go into the settings of a VM, you grow the virtual disk size, then you go to the Windows 2008 file system and you right-click, say, extend, and you're done. But for the older OSs, we have to use this kind of tool set.
Can you use that with Linux at all?
You can absolutely use that with Linux. But you know what? If you've got an LVM-based volume manager, you can still grow the file system in Linux live, right?
Yeah.
So, but you know what? If you're running regular Red Hat 7.3, you probably can't grow the file system live. You could use this tool to go ahead and grow those file systems.
You still run it down with that whole.
Yeah, if the OS supports live OS resizing, great. I mean, we can grow the VMDK anytime, but it's the limitations of the file system and the operating system we're running in those VMs that makes us have to rely on tools like this. You want? Anyone else want to go any further into G-parted?
Does that also let you align on the boundary tip for 2003?
Nope. If you're going to do that, I still recommend a different strategy. There's pay-for products that'll do all the automation. Then there's the manual process of, hey, I can build a template correctly with the disk aligned when I build the 2003 OS. Let's say I rolled out hundreds of VMs that didn't. You could always go out. You could always go out and buy the pay-for products. They do have a fit. You could always build the template and then do all sorts of restores from backup, because then the 2003 templates rolled out. Good news about disk alignment in Windows 2008, it started, so 2008 R2, and VMFS version 3, only if it was created on a vSphere, on a vCenter server. If you went to an ESX server directly, it didn't do it, but if you did it from a vCenter server, it would align all the disk partitions for you. So, I mean, are we talking about really old stuff that you got floating around, or are we talking about stuff that's been that you've done since the 4X releases?
No, I mean, I've had it aligned with 2003.
It's terrible, right?
It would just build it a template, build it right.
And when you build a template right, you don't have to work hard ever again. The template's right. And I would always rather you spend 4 hours building a single template than 3 hours and then have to fix all your problems later on. Because how many VMs did you create from your template today? All right. Yeah, work hard once.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm on the next slide for PuTTY. PuTTY, pretty universal. It's SSH for anything Windows, Linux, switches, Unix, and included in that is ESXi. Downside, I don't use this anymore for ESXi connections. Why? It's not best practice to make SSH connections to your ESXi hosts. VMware and all their best practices and all the guys who write and talk about it say don't enable it. The big question then becomes, well, I want to run command line. How do I run command lines? Later on, you'll see that we talk about, one of the slides will be about the virtual management assistant. VMware wants you to use the virtual management assistant to manage all CLI functions to all your ESXi hosts. That's a Linux appliance. So you would use this tool, this PuTTY tool, to connect to that VMA. You can still use it for all your other functions, but don't enable SSH. That's breaking best practices. The audio overlay, when you watch this video back in the office, well, you'll hear me say exactly the same thing. Breaking best practices. Don't do this. I'm just showing you as an example. Anyone not use PuTTY? All right. Sorry for being redundant then. All right. WinSCP. Again, we're... tool lets me copy from Windows to Linux. Why do I still show this if I'm not supposed to be talking to my ESX servers through this tool? Because when I have to upload a file to my virtual management assistant, it's a Linux machine. I have to copy files from my Windows desktop that I've downloaded up to my virtual management assistant. The Windows Secure Copy or WinSCP software will allow me to do that. Quick example, APC network power network shutdown from APC. So the ability for my UPSs to lose power, recognize they lost power, and shut down my ESXi servers gracefully. It has to be installed on the VMA. So I still need this software, I still use it. Though the day-to-day use has been depreciated substantially. Yeah.
Why this particular one? There's a few other ones.
Why this particular one? Because this is the one I've been using for 12 years. There's no preference over any other free SCP tool. Right. This is just my preference for using Secure Copy. Yep, there's a lot you can use. This is just my preference.
This one's good enough, and it's the money knows.
Yeah, that's why everyone uses PuTTY, right? I'm sure there's a million other SSH tools out there for Windows.
If that one's been around, you know how to...
The other reason is the guy who wrote the program for PuTTY, I asked him if I could include and distribute it, in 2003 when I was using it day to day, and he said yes. So I've always been true to PuTTY. So.
Are you familiar with the PuTTY, the other one that does multiple commands? PuTTY's the command manager, I think.
So a command manager for PuTTY, so you mean the ability to open up 3 or 4 tabs and then type a command once and have it push down all of those different machines? Yeah, I was very familiar with that in the Solaris space when I was doing Sun clusters. I don't remember what the tool was, and I don't remember what the tool is for the PuTTY version. No, but you're only talking to one system now. You're talking to VMA, right? We're not talking to 10 ESX hosts anymore.
Right.
So I don't see that need to be the same. But if I ever go back and touch my Sun clusters, I would absolutely look for that software and use it because I hate typing twice.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Sun Cluster's still around somewhere. I'm sure it is. I just got to find out if Sun's still around. We're recording this. Sorry. Sorry, that was my first Unix. I love my Sun Solaris. I started in the 2.6 days, so I do have a bias. Next slide, we're talking about VMware Converter. Everybody here's used VMware Converter? All right, so the video is going to talk about where you download it, how you install it, and some of the options you have. Well, it sounds like this room is probably going to be aware. We can install, we can do a P2V, we can do a V2V, we can do it from a Cronus True Image and zip files and ghost files, lots of sources, but the end result is we're converting to a VMware virtual machine format. One of my other practical uses for VMware Converter is what we were talking about earlier, shrinking volumes. I would use this to do a resize of a data or operating system volume. So if the developer wanted 200 gigs of drive space, and I gave it to him, and he's using 5, I could go, instead of doing the shrink from the Windows OS perspective and trusting Windows to put files where it says it is, I can use this tool and be supported and just shrink that file system and do a V2V, and during that V2V process, I can shrink the volumes. And then it's supported as well. So that's a big thing for me, is I like to make sure I maintain support, and I don't add risk to anything I'm doing. So do I need to stay on the VMware Converter screen, or are we good? Good? All right. P2V is exciting, isn't it? All right. RV Tools. I love this new tool set. RV Tools, on the next slide here, it's another free piece. It's a small 1 or 2 meg download. What it's going to do is it's going to install a shortcut on your desktop that points out to a program directory. The reason I say it's a shortcut on your desktop, they don't populate your start menu, so don't delete the shortcut, it installs on your desktop. Because then you got to go digging for it. But it's a pretty simple tool. It's going to ask you for some read-only credentials, or administrator credentials, either way, to your vCenter server. When you give it those credentials, it's going to go out and it's going to read all the configuration information about all your VMs. And sorry, let's get that one to play out. There we are. Sorry, hit pause. When you're going through this, essentially it's going to go out and query all your VMs through your vCenter infrastructure, and it's going to pull useful information that you care about as a day-to-day administrator or overall administrator architect. Is VMware Tools installed? Is VMware Tools up to date? Is it set to automatically update now for during power on sequences? Is there machines that have CD-ROMs attached? Are there machines that have snapshots? And you can parse this information any which way you want. Everything you can see in the vSphere client, but you can't sort and export to Excel, this will let you sort and export it out to Excel, and you can do all your pivot tables or data mining, however you see fit about any of the functions or features that are in your VMs or in your VMX files. Yes?
Comment. This is, let's say, like it says 3.4 version. Next month they come out with 3.5. Would the link still work, or?
The links that you're going to be provided in the email are going to be links to these videos. Right. They will still be there. Once you see those links, you'll figure out who I am and what channel I'm on, and you'll see that I update things as required.
Okay, now I'm just asking down the road in the future if they come out with another one.
If they come out with another one, I mean, you already know the tool. You'll figure it out. If it's something, reason that I always make sure people have my information is if there's something specific that you want to see, let me know. I'll put it together and I'll put it out there. All right, because it's not about me answering the question for you. If you have the question, hundreds of other people must have that same question. I'd rather make sure I'm helping everybody, not just you.
Right.
So, yeah, I always take all suggestions. I welcome them. That's actually how I develop my course flow for every quarter. I teach 4 or 5 classes a quarter. And depending on what user feedback is and what people want, depends on what courses I make available. So, I mean, it's all about making you guys happy. So as you can see, it's all spreadsheets, and you can sort all these columns however you want. You can't really see what the content is, but I think that if you go ahead and you download that on your own and spend the 5 minutes playing with it, you'll be happy you did. Yep, to Excel or comma delimited. And then you can do whatever crazy modeling you'd like to do from whatever software you want after that. I personally, I just look for what my only use on this. Anybody got a snapshot? Nope. Good. And that's my use. So pretty cool. Moving on, we'll go on to the next slide and we'll talk about cloud physics. I'm kind of biased on cloud physics. I love the people that I know behind the scenes that are working to make cloud physics a pretty cool web application. So cloud physics is a group of really smart VCDX type and VMware kind of employees that got together and built this web app. The point of this web app is to say, I'm going to install a virtual appliance in your environment. And you'll see that as I go through and do the registration here in the video. Once I get through and register and then sign back in, the first thing it's going to ask me to do is to download an open virtual appliance or an OVF. That OVF runs on your vSphere environment in your infrastructure. You give it an IP and you give it credentials to the vSphere infrastructure. Once you do that, it's going to parse that information. It's going to send it up to the Cloud Physics web servers. And it's things like host name and computer name and how's the cluster configured, what's my HA configuration settings on my VMware clusters look like. And then it's going to compare all that information from your environment against what everybody in the community has defined as best practices. Is HA admission control enabled? Do you have enough tolerance on your HA cluster to survive the loss of a host, if that was what your intent was? Is your DRS workload management working? Are all my VMware tools installed, and do they all have the power sequence to be, the setting to update when the host reboots? Lots of little things. But more importantly than any of that, when it goes back on the next screen and you'll see that I log in and you'll see all the gray tabs with that kind of information available, you'll see a white card. And that white card says it's a community card. So, just like I said, whatever people want to learn, I'll be more than happy to do. The folks at Cloud Physics ask for the community's input. What's the next thing you want us to provide you for feedback against best practices? And the more people go in and write information about what they want to see and then vote on other people's comments. So if you decided that you wanted to see storage I/O metrics in Cloud Physics, and am I over-allocated or is there a problem? And 100,000 people went and voted for your card. We know what the next development cycle is going to be in Cloud Physics is that storage I/O request. So it's by the community, for the community. Right now it's free. It's in beta. I could see for some reason somewhere down the road that they may end up finding a way to make revenue from this product by offering things that we find that we can't live without. That might happen, but while it's a free tool, it's at least providing me an ability to go ahead and align myself and say, hey, this is outside the scope of what's the norm for best practices. So it's all your vendors will work with you, and there's a VMware health check service that they could do against your environment. This is about 80-90% of that, because there are some things like, do I have these two cables for these two NICs and the same vSwitch going to two different switches? There are certain things that this software can't figure out, that a human being can figure out when they're developing a service. But you know what? This takes the software side of it into account and validates that you're aligned with best practices. So I do like this. The junk mail I get when I sign up for this is once in a while they'll let me know that there's an update. Anyone want to talk about Cloud Physics anymore?
You say best practices. Is it best practice or popular practice?
Best practices. The reason I was excited about the people who contribute to this is it's experts at VMware. Yeah. Experts in the community, people who are respected and write blogs, and you'll see the whole list when you go and explore the product set. If you read Scott Lowe's website, if you read people like Duncan Epping, and you read Frank Denham, if you're looking at those folks as experts, then you'll agree with the experts and the recommendations that you see here. Yes, we could always consider best practices to be arbitrary, but given the folks who are behind this product, I believe in their best practices because they align with mine as well. So again, that's why I say when I started talking about this, I am biased. So
it's not just what 15 out of 20 people doing.
It's more like, it'd be like what 2 or 3 million people are doing out of 3 million and one for best practices. Yeah, it's definitely the folks who would come in and critique you and run a health check are the ones who are determining what best practices in Cloud Physics would be. You're welcome. All right, so then there's another one, which is backup and replication. Anybody using physical backup only, like a traditional Legato network or backup exec, net backup kind of software in there that you're using that today? So one of the things, there's vendors that have been coming out with virtual only kind of backup solutions. Veeam is offering a free backup software. It's actually the same code base as their pay-for product, but the Veeam backup software for the free edition lacks one thing: the ability to schedule jobs on a recurring basis. So it's the exact same code, and when you watch the video, we'll show you how to switch between full mode and evaluation mode, and you just lose some of those advanced features. But if you ever had the need to just back up a VM on the spot, this is the kind of software that can do it. Yes, I know we can go and do other things like export to OVF, but that might require a power down. Yes, we can do backups with our regular backup software, but maybe politics and finding the guy who runs backup to do that quick backup job is aggravating, and we just need it done now because the vendors need to install the software. I'll find whatever excuse you'd like. If you need some free backup software, this works pretty good. And they're actually giving them away today on these lanyards, and worst case is you get a 2 gig USB key. And a lanyard. But it works pretty good. There's also Veeam Zip, which is also just the ability to quickly zip up a VM into a file on your desktop. Anybody want to talk about Veeam Zip in any great detail? Not now? Anybody go to the Veeam webinar earlier? No? Okay. All right, and then we get to the virtual management assistant. Everybody here in this room, on this next slide, everybody here in the room has actually downloaded vSphere at one point in time, right? ESX, vCenter. Anybody ever go to the second tab that says drivers and tools, and then downloaded the virtual management assistant? All right, so you guys are actually using it already?
I think it's not very good.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm not a scripter guy, but I know it goes in because it's required for all the CLI functions that the guys do for day-to-day administration. You'll find it here, and we go through the entire link set to find that software. Once you get it, it's just an open virtual appliance. You import it in your environment. It needs an IP address, needs a name. You'll set it up. The video will show you how it gets set up in its entirety. Then you would use the earlier discussed PuTTY, connect to this box over SSH, and then you could run all the command line functions you would want against your ESX environment, maintaining best practices from VMware about not enabling SSH on each ESXi host. Again, the only downside to using the VMA, there's a little bit of a nuance in the syntax for running the commands. Outside of that nuance in the syntax, and once you get over that and stop complaining about it, like I did, you'll find that it's a pretty cool tool, and the new syntax is awesome because it's aware of data centers and clusters and other hierarchical objects from the VMware environment.
Does that replace RCLI? Is there a tool for that?
RCLI is still available. That's just a tool you can load up in the Windows environment. I usually favor this because the folks who are running scripting languages are very comfortable with SSH. Plus, VMA is also required for all, I mentioned the PowerShoot, the network shutdown. So if I have to have this to run network-based tools in my environment, why would I not use this to run all my CLI stuff? The syntax is similar, if not identical, between RCLI and the VMA language. So, I mean, I like to only use one thing at a time. If you wanted RCLI, you can still download and install that on your Windows desktop.
I didn't know if there was much of a difference. I wanted to replace RCLI.
It's in addition to. Anybody want to stay focused on the VMA? No, then we'll just move on. And the next slide is actually the last slide of any content. And the downside is there's no movie. The upside is there's no movie. Because you can't show PowerCLI and PowerShell in a 5-minute or even in a 1-hour session. All right. The point here is the reason I include this. There's a lot of folks who don't even know that PowerCLI existed. Is anybody in here using PowerShell today on the day-to-day basis? Just one. PowerShell is not a pretty language or an easy transition from our DOS command days. But PowerShell is the most powerful tool out there today to manage Windows Server environments. If you're not using PowerShell today, you're making your life difficult by not automating your tool sets. In Windows 2012, they're really trying to focus you into PowerShell to do almost all your administrative work. The PowerCLI essentially is an add-on to PowerShell. So that way, PowerShell works with commandlets, things that work with objects inside of a computer, so get host name or something along that lines. When you add the PowerCLI components to it, what you're actually putting in there is all the VMware specific commandlets. So data center host, cluster, do this function, vmotion, all of those functions can now be called out from your command line scripts running on Windows hosts. We're actually developing courses around that because we've had such a demand that my Q1 and Q2, 2 of my courses have to be focused on PowerShell. So there's that much demand. People are actually getting ready to learn it and take the time. But you know what? All the successful admins I found out there are really embracing this, and those are the folks that I see that have tremendous job security and future career potential. So I know it's a tough language to learn. It's tough to find time to do stuff, but I do find it's in most people's best interest to exploit something that they can do really well, or learn how to cut and paste Google code really well. All right, and so really that's the end of my presentation. I really just wanted to cover some of these tools. Again, all these videos, if you sign those forms, that quick mailing list, you'll get a link tomorrow. It's going to have a link to all these videos. You'll be able to then go out and watch them at your leisure in your office and review them. And if you have any questions, please just ask me. I got my cards out here. Email me. Yeah, I'll be more than happy to answer your questions, or if, as stated earlier, if you had something very specific you'd like me to develop a video for and walkthrough for, let me know and see about getting it out there for you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.